Doctrine, Volume 1, in the 1888 edition, page 208. Now, these are her italics. Look at this. Now, I summarize it first. Most significantly, it was, and I put this in, but it is the golden proportional symmetry that was revealed in the ancient initiations passed down by the adepts of the fourth root race. They had evolved into a state of consciousness which is advanced. Even though we're in the fifth root race, nevertheless, at their highest states, there was awareness, and it is within this initiatory tradition of the mysteries that all the rules of proportion are those, Blavatsky's italics, taught anciently at initiations. And one should acquaint oneself with the truly divine art and understand, that's why we're doing a sacred geometry workshop, understand the deep esoteric significance hidden in every rule and law of proportion. Plato's initiatory knowledge of the ratios and proportional symmetry attained in the mysteries was, as Blavatsky said, preserved by Vitruvius, who gave to posterity the rules of construction of the Grecian temples of the immortal gods, who was himself an initiate and can only be studied esoterically, again on page 209 of Volume 1. As she says in the Theosophist, April 1887, and this is important because George Henry Felt was interested in Solomon's Temple. Ark of the Covenant is an easy one because that's 2.5 cubits by 1.5 cubits. 2.5 by 1.5 is obviously, how many times does 1/2 go into 2.5? How many times does 1/2 go into 1.5? 5:3. They're Fibonacci approximations to the golden ratio. That's how, at least in their deeper significance of, as Felt was trying to point out, by the way, of the Jewish Tanakh, what he called the Old Testament, it's all Kabbalistic. The stuff on the surface, the fundamentalists eventually are going to have to realize it's nonsense on the surface. It's the deeper esoteric significance that's in there. So as she says, the geometrical key, which was really only one of the 7 keys, but a very important one, known but to initiates, also underlies the biblical structures, and as we see, including Noah's Ark. And so back in 75, I'm also writing on alchemy, and that's what this thing is all about. And so if you study alchemical texts, look at the pictures, because oftentimes they encoded on the pictures the secrets. And so you get the hexagon, closest packing of space, Christ in the center, but here's the tincture. And the tincture, of course, is the Philosopher's Stone. It is this quest for the Holy Grail. And so when you look at the symbolism, there again, you see the peacock's tail, the eyes of the peacock's tail. They're in Fibonacci sequence. And so it's all metamorphosis. It allows human beings to engage in the self-transformation. So phyllotaxis, leaf arrangement. Everything in nature is pushing out and spinning, rotating at the same time, which gives us the spirals of nature. And as we're going to see, there are 3 basic ways leaves will form. There's distichous at 180 degrees. Then there is the whorled, which goes at 90-degree angles like this. And then there's spiral. Spiral allows the maximum moisture, maximum sunlight, bee pollination or pollination of insects, spirals the water to the roots. And here it is. They're reversed on this slide, but here's the biggie. 250,000 species of higher plants, 3 types of leaf arrangement, and notice the divergence angle. You go from here to here to here to here. It's 137.5 degrees. So you're golden cutting the circle to get it. 80% of the 250,000 species uses spiral phyllotaxis, and the most common is 137.5 degrees. Now we come to George Henry Felt. On the 7th of September, 1875, Felt, an engineer and architect, gave a highly instructive lecture on the lost canon of proportions of the Egyptians to about 17 people gathered in HPB's rooms at 46 Irving Place, New York. Felt showed how upon a certain temple wall, a star of perfection could be inscribed within which the whole secret of geometrical proportion could be read. The star of perfection consisted of a circle, a square within and without, containing a common triangle, 2 Egyptian triangles, and a pentagon. This diagram not only unlocked the secrets of the Kabbalah, but then, when applied to ancient Egyptian architecture as well as to the Greek, showed how all the masterpieces of both were constructed, even the statues. In music, in prismatic colors, the configuration of leaves, and in the world's circumference, he found the same law of proportional harmony. From Ransom's A Short History of the Theosophical Society, pages 76 to 77. On page 77, we find Felt had found that the Egyptian priests were adepts in magical science and had the power to evoke and employ the spirits of the elements. Now remember that the elements are related to the four of the five Platonic solids: earth, air, fire, and water. And they have geometric correspondences. I'm probably giving a hint that I maybe shouldn't, but we're doing it. They had left formularies on record which he had deciphered and put successfully to the test. He held that the most uncouth figures of Egyptian temples were not mythical, but representations of actual forms seen by the spirits of the old Egyptians. He declared that he could, by following out certain formula and putting himself in a particular state of mind, well, as he says, translate or transform his mind into a different state, he might see the figures. An animated discussion. Here's the founding of the Theosophical Society after that lecture. An animated discussion followed, during which the idea occurred to Colonel Olcott that it would be a good thing to form a society to pursue and promote such occult research. He passed a note to HPB, who agreed. Now, there's some dispute about this, whether it was HPB's idea or whether it was Olcott's idea. He then spoke of the philosophic character of ancient theosophies and their sufficiency to reconcile, like alchemy, all existing antagonism, and of Mr. Felt's achievement in extracting the key to the architecture of nature from the scanty fragments of ancient lore. Occult proposed to form a society for the investigation of science and religion, the society to be entirely eclectic, the friend of true religion, and the enemy of scientific materialism. It would be a nucleus around which might gather those willing to work together to organize a society of occultists, begin to collect a library, and to diffuse information concerning those secret laws of nature which were so familiar to the Chaldeans and Egyptians but were unknown to the modern world of science. Mr. Felt was to teach the right kind of person how to evoke and control the elementals. It was unanimously agreed that the society be formed for the study and elucidation of occultism, the Kabbalah, etc., and so forth. Let's keep going because we've got a lot left. And then we have the magician with the four elements, the sylphs of the air, and the salamanders of the fire, and the undines of the water, and the gnomes of the earth. And of course, the fifth would be, like the dodecahedron, would be the Egyptian, the cosmos itself. At the September 13th meeting, Felt further described his discoveries. It was agreed that the name of the proposed society would be the Theosophical Society. So that's 6 days after his lecture. It was agreed that the title both expressed the esoteric truth they wished to reach and covered the ground of Felt's methods of occult research. On October 18th, at the first meeting of the new Theosophical Society, it was announced that Mr. Felt, if in town, would continue his Egyptological lectures. The objects of the society were very simply stated. I'm reading this because there's an audio tape, so we need to do that as well. Were very simply stated as being to collect and diffuse a knowledge of the laws which govern the universe. Principle of brotherhood became the dominating object of the society. Now, on September 18th, the Academy publication wrote an announcement that Boughton has now in press a work which promises to be of the great interest. The work is written by Felt and is entitled, and what he did is he added an L to the Kabbalah of the Jews, and he recognizes, I read some of his writings, Kabbalah, C-A-B-A-L, he recognized of the Greeks, but he wanted this one to generalize for the Egyptians and the Greek canon of proportion. Mr. Felt claims to have, quote, discovered the true geometrical system of the Egyptians, the long-lost and eagerly sought-for key wherewith Egypt unlocked the mysteries of art and nature. Mr. Felt believes that his discoveries will give to the world for the first time in 3,000 years an exact knowledge of that marvelous system of proportion of which all subsequent systems have been but fragments and distortions. The election of the officers on October 30th, Alcott president, vice presidents Pancoast and Felt, corresponding secretary Blavatsky, consul to the society, judge, and then the others present. Alcott gave his address, promised that through his discoveries, Mr. Felt would, by simple chemical appliances, exhibit the races of beings which, invisible to our eyes, people the elements. Now, let's go on with this, because it's interesting what he goes on to say. And the name of the Theosophical Society would hold its place in history as the first to exhibit these elementary principles, and thus astound the churches, the unimaginative academies of science, the materialists, and the shade-ridden spiritualists. And furthermore, since the days when the Neoplatonists and Theurgists of Alexandria were scattered by Christianity, this was the first revival of the study of Theosophy. On April 4th, 1876, Cobb, under the instruction from the consul, issued a note stating that Vice President Felt was prepared to deliver the lectures. The communication was to be treated as confidential in accordance with the observance of secrecy now in force. You have to realize something's going on at this point where there's secrecy at a deeper level. Felt gave the titles of his lectures. Now, this is very interesting. I think it's worth our taking a look. A demonstration that the universe is constructed upon strictly geometrical principles with illustrations of the vegetable, chromatic, harmonic, and astronomic laws. I've read in his preamble that it's actually, he feels that the ancient Egyptians discovered it through a study of the heavens, through astronomical insights, and then in nature as well. The second lecture, the applications of the law to Egyptian, Greek, Roman, and Hebraic constructions, temples, and statues. These two lectures he did in fact give, but that was it. Something happened. Thirdly, practical experiments in electricity and chemistry to demonstrate the Egyptian philosophy of evolution, and fourthly, philosophic experiments relating to their spiritualistic beliefs, incarnations, etc. Ransom, page 89. First lecture was given, but it was not until June. Felt delivered the second. After that, again, failed them. They were secretly discouraged by Felt's fiasco, but there seemed to be no substitute. They'd also counted, by the way, upon HPB to display her powers, but she also refused to do the slightest phenomenon at their meetings. But here's where the secrecy issue comes in. And one of the group that I'm now working with, Mark Demarest, with the Felt working group, has concluded it appears that Felt had felt, no pun intended, constrained by his oath of secrecy, and had asked the consul of the society for permission to write. What is most important is that in her scrapbook, Blavatsky placed a clipping from the Banner of Light pertaining to Alcott's 1886 inaugural address and added her handwritten statement. And Mr. Felt has done it in the presence of 9 persons in all. That's from the Collected Works, Volume 1, pages 192 to 193. In the fall of 1887, in Isis Unveiled, Blavatsky wrote, as to the practical results to be obtained by the investigations of geometry, very fortunately for students who are coming upon the stage of action, we're no longer forced to content ourselves with mere conjectures. George Felt may one day be